Ethan Cole hadn't planned on running. 6 weeks ago, he still had a job, a lease in Columbus, and a fiancée named Laura who packed her things while he was at work and left a note on the kitchen counter instead of a conversation. 3 weeks after that, the layoffs hit the marketing firm, and Ethan found himself standing in an empty apartment holding a box of his own belongings, wondering how a life could unravel that fast. So when his cousin mentioned a cabin for rent deep in the Appalachian backcountry of West Virginia, cheap, isolated, the kind of place where you can hear yourself think again, Ethan didn't think twice. He needed quiet. He needed distance. He didn't know yet that distance was exactly what the mountains were going to give him, more of it than he'd ever asked for. The drive took 4 hours past the last gas station with a working sign, then another 40 minutes on a gravel road that the GPS gave up on entirely. Pine and oak pressed in close on both sides, the kind of forest that seemed to swallow sound. By the time Ethan's truck rolled into the clearing, the October sun was already low and orange, throwing long shadows across a squat, sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney and a covered porch. An old man was waiting on that porch, sitting in a rocking chair like he'd been carved into it. He rose slowly as Ethan cut the engine. "You'd be the city fella," the old man said. His voice had the gravel of a lifetime spent in these hills. "Name's Harris. I take care of this place, keep it rented out since my brother passed. Ethan Cole." He shook the offered hand, dry, strong, calloused. "Thanks for having me on short notice. Ain't a problem." Harris's eyes did something Ethan almost missed. A flicker down toward the tree line, quick and instinctive, like a man checking a mirror out of habit. "Come on in, get you settled before dark. You don't want to be fumbling around out here once the sun's gone." Something in the way he said it, "once the sun's gone," sat oddly with Ethan, but he let it pass. Grief makes you read into things. He followed Harris inside. The cabin was better than Ethan expected. A stone fireplace, a small kitchen, a loft bedroom reached by a narrow staircase, thick oak beams overhead. It smelled like cedar and old smoke. Harris walked him through the basics, the generator, the well pump, where the firewood was stacked. And then, at the door, he stopped and pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "Before I go," Harris said, "I need you to read this, and I need you to actually mean it when you say you understand." Ethan unfolded the paper, 5 lines, written in a careful, old-fashioned hand, the kind of penmanship nobody under 60 still had. Rules for staying at the cabin. 1. Never go into the woods after sunset, no matter what you hear calling your name. 2. If you hear knocking at the door between midnight and 4 a.m., do not answer it. Count to 100 in your head instead. 3. Keep the porch light burning every night until sunrise. Never let it go dark. 4. If the landline rings past midnight, do not pick up, even if it sounds like someone you love. 5. Above all, even if someone calls you at night and you know their voice, never open the door. Ethan read it twice, a small, uncertain laugh escaping him. This a joke? Like a cabin gimmick? Get the city boy spooked? Harris didn't laugh back. His face had gone very still, very serious, the kind of stillness that made the joke in Ethan's chest curdle a little. "My brother wrote those rules 40 years ago. He didn't write them for fun. Every renter gets the same paper. You follow them, you'll have the best sleep of your life out here. You don't..." He stopped himself, shook his head like he was pulling back from an edge. "Just follow them, all 5. Especially the last one." "Why especially the last one?" Harris looked at him for a long moment, and something passed behind his eyes. Not fear exactly, but the weary caution of a man who had explained this before and watched people not listen. Because everything else on that list you can survive breaking if you're lucky and quick. That one, you don't get a second chance on. You hear a voice you know outside that door at night. Your mama, your girl, don't matter who. It ain't them. You understand me? Ethan wanted to say something reassuring, something to cut the strange heavy weight that had settled into the room. But the words that came out were smaller than he meant them to be. "Yeah, I understand." Harris nodded once, satisfied enough, and gathered his coat. At the door he paused, glancing out at the tree line again, that same quick, habitual check, and said, almost too quietly to catch, "Porch lights on a breaker in the kitchen if it trips. Don't let it go dark on you." Then he was down the steps, into his truck, and gone. Taillights shrinking into the dusk until the forest closed back around the empty road like water over a stone. Ethan stood on the porch a while after the sound of the engine had faded completely, listening. It was, he realized slowly, too quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of squirrels in the leaf litter. Just wind moving through the high branches and, somewhere very far off, a sound he couldn't place. A low creak, like a door swinging on old hinges, except there was no other cabin for miles. He told himself it was nothing. Old houses settled, forests had their own noises. He went inside, locked the door out of habit rather than fear, and spent the evening unpacking, building a fire, doing the small domestic tasks that make a strange place start to feel like yours. He found the fuse box, flipped the porch light on as instructed, and told himself the whole rules-less business was just mountain folklore, a bit of local color to make renters feel like they were getting an authentic experience. By 10 o'clock, he'd almost convinced himself. The first thing that unsettled him wasn't loud. It was the silence, how absolute it remained, hour after hour, when logically the woods should have been full of small living sounds. No owls, no wind-stirred branches scraping the roof, just his own breathing and the tick of the cooling fireplace. Around 11, he stepped out onto the porch for air and noticed the trees at the edge of the clearing were utterly still, though he could feel a breeze on his own face. Wrong, in a way he couldn't articulate, like watching a video where the audio didn't quite match the picture. He went back inside and locked the door again, more deliberately this time. At midnight, the landline rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet, an old mechanical trill from the phone mounted on the kitchen wall. A phone Ethan hadn't even registered was hooked up to a line. He stood frozen for 3 rings, Harris's rule surfacing in his mind. If the landline rings past midnight, do not pick up. His hand hovered near it anyway, some rational impulse insisting it might be Harris checking in, or a wrong number, or nothing at all. Just old wiring misfiring in an old house. On the 4th ring, curiosity, or something that felt like curiosity but sat wrong in his stomach, won out, and he lifted the receiver just enough to hear, without pressing it fully to his ear. Mud, static. Then, underneath the static, a voice. His own voice, flattened and hollow, like a recording played back through a bad speaker. Open the door. Ethan slammed the receiver down so hard the base cracked against the wall. His heart was hammering, his skin gone cold and prickling. He told himself it was a prank, a glitch, anything. His mind scrambling for an explanation that would let him breathe normally again, when 3 slow, deliberate knocks sounded against the front door. Knock, 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 and then, muffled through the wood, unmistakable, a voice that was, impossibly, wrongly, his own, calling softly from the other side. Ethan, come on, let me in. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the cabin, phone receiver dangling from its cracked cradle, staring at the front door as if it might dissolve the danger just by being watched hard enough. The voice came again, closer now, pressed right up against the wood grain. Ethan, it's cold out here, just open the door. It was his own voice, not similar, identical. The same slight rasp he got at the end of a long day, the same way he drew out the vowel in his own name when he was tired. Every instinct told him to answer, some old animal wiring insisting that a voice this familiar could not possibly belong to anything dangerous. He took 1 step toward the door before Harris's warning cut through the fog in his head like a blade. Even if someone calls you at night, and you know their voice, never open the door. He stopped. His hand was already reaching for the deadbolt, and he forced it back down to his side, nails biting into his palm. Who is this? His own voice came out cracked, thinner than he meant it to. Silence for a long moment. Then, softer, almost hurt. It's me. Don't you recognize your own voice, Ethan? The knocking started again. Not 3 measured taps this time, but a rapid, uneven rattling, like knuckles dragged fast across the wood, followed by a scraping sound low near the base of the door, as if something were testing the frame, feeling for a weakness. Ethan backed away toward the fireplace, grabbing the iron poker from its stand, without any clear plan beyond having something solid in his hands. Then, as abruptly as it started, the sound stopped. Complete silence swallowed the cabin again. Ethan stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 minutes, poker gripped tight, ears straining for any sound at all. Nothing came. Eventually his legs gave out, and he sank onto the couch, poker across his lap, and did not sleep. Not for 1 second, until gray light finally crept through the curtains. Morning made everything look almost reasonable. Ethan walked the perimeter of the cabin in the flat, honest daylight, half expecting to feel foolish. He wasn't. Around the base of the front door, in the soft dirt of the flower bed Harris's brother had apparently once kept, there were marks. Not footprints, nothing so clean as that. Long dragging gouges, 5 to a set, deeper at one end like something had pressed down hard and then pulled back. They circled the entire cabin, evenly spaced, as if whatever made them had been pacing, testing every wall, every window, methodically. He crouched by one set of gouges and laid his own hand beside it for scale. His hand looked small. He called Harris. It took 4 rings before the old man picked up, and Ethan realized with a strange lurch that 4 rings was exactly how long it had taken last night before he'd answered the wrong call. "You made it through the first night," Harris said, before Ethan had even spoken. Not a question. Something called the house. The landline rang, and it sounded like me. And then something was at the door, knocking, talking, using my own voice. "You didn't open it." Sharp, urgent. No, I didn't." A long exhale on the other end, relief audible even through the static of bad reception. Good, that's good, son. You did right." "Harris, what is that thing? What's out there?" "A foothold to do what?" Another pause, heavier this time. "You don't want to find out. Just keep following the rules. Lights gotta stay on tonight, every night. And whatever you do, don't go wandering the tree line after dark, not even to check on a noise. It uses sound to pull you out past the porch light. Once you're past that light, that's its ground, not yours." The call ended with Harris promising to drive out and check the property line, though he didn't sound eager about it. And Ethan spent the rest of the day in a strange wired state, unpacking the last of his boxes with the too careful movements of someone trying to convince himself life was still ordinary. He kept catching himself listening, for footsteps, for static, for anything. Around 3 in the afternoon, needing air and a distraction, he decided to explore a little, sticking close to the cabin, following a worn path that led maybe 100 yards into the tree line before curving back. It was there he found the second thing that told him this place was wrong, in a way that went beyond a scary bedtime story. Nailed to an oak tree, weathered nearly gray with age but still legible, was a small wooden marker. Someone, Harris's brother probably, had carved a set of tally marks into the wood, dozens of them, grouped in 5s, running down the length of the plank. Beneath the tallies, cut deep into the grain. "They don't all leave." Ethan stood there a long time, the cold October wind picking up around him, staring at those words until his hands had gone numb at his sides. He thought about Laura, about the layoff, about how he'd told himself this trip was about healing, about finding quiet. He thought about how badly he wanted this to be nothing. Kids messing around, local legend, an old man's superstition passed down and inflated with each retelling. He didn't fully believe that anymore. Not after the marks in the dirt. Not after hearing his own voice come out of the dark asking to be let in. He made it back to the cabin before the light started to fail, checked the porch bulb twice, and settled in for what he told himself would be a calmer second night. He had answers now, or the beginning of them, and understanding a threat was supposed to make it smaller. It didn't. Midnight came and went without incident, and Ethan allowed himself the smallest ember of hope that maybe last night had been some kind of one-time test, a threshold thing, and that having refused it once, he was safe now. That hope lasted exactly until 1:47 a.m., when he woke on the couch to the sound of someone crying softly outside. Not his own voice this time, but a woman's, muffled, broken, achingly familiar. Laura's voice. Ethan, please. I'm so cold. I don't know where I am. Please open the door. Please." Every rational thought Ethan had went white and silent, replaced by something older and more urgent. The same wiring that makes a parent run toward a child's scream. He was on his feet before he'd decided to stand, halfway to the door before Harris's words caught him by the collar. "It can't come inside on its own. Needs you to invite it." He stopped 6 feet from the door, shaking, listening to a voice that sounded exactly like the woman he'd loved for 4 years, sobbing his name through the wood, and he understood, with a clarity that felt like ice water down his spine, that the Hollow Walker didn't need to know Laura. It only needed to have heard her voice once, somewhere, sometime, clear enough to memorize. And there was only one place it could have heard that: his phone. The voicemail she'd left him the night she broke it off, the one he still hadn't deleted, the one he sometimes played back at 2 a.m. when the apartment felt too empty. He'd played it out here too, last night in fact, sitting by the fire, needing to hear her voice even if it hurt. It had been listening. "You're not her," Ethan said, voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. "You're not real." The crying stopped instantly, a cutoff so abrupt it was somehow more horrifying than the sound itself had been. A silence stretched out, thick and listening. Then the voice came again, and this time it wasn't sobbing. It was flat and low, and it wasn't trying to sound like Laura anymore, though it still used her cadence, her exact turns of phrase, wearing her voice like a mask slipping sideways. "Clever boy. Harris teach you that? He taught the last one too." Ethan's blood went cold. "The last one? Renter before you. Real friendly fella. Followed the rules real good, first 2 weeks. Everybody breaks eventually though. Everybody gets curious. Everybody wants to know what happens if they just look. Something shifted outside, a weight moving across the porch boards, slow and deliberate, and then, impossibly, the porch light. The one thing Harris had insisted, above almost everything else, must never go dark. Flickered once, twice, and died, plunging the cabin into a darkness so complete Ethan could no longer see his own hand in front of his face. For one full second, Ethan didn't move at all. The dark that swallowed the cabin wasn't the ordinary dark of a power outage. It had weight to it, pressed against his eyes like something solid. And in that darkness, the voice outside the door laughed, low and wrong, still wearing the last threads of Laura's cadence, even as it curdled into something else entirely. There, now we're even closer to even. Ethan's hand found the fireplace mantle, and from there the iron poker he'd left leaning against the stone. He gripped it hard enough that his knuckles ached, and forced himself to think instead of run. Harris had said the thing needed an invitation, needed him to choose, of his own will, to let it in. The porch light dying wasn't an invitation, not yet. He had to believe that, because the alternative was standing in his kitchen doing nothing while whatever was outside figured out a way around a rule that was supposed to be absolute. He fumbled his way to the kitchen, found the flashlight he'd stashed in a drawer his first afternoon here, some old habit of preparedness that suddenly felt like the smartest thing he'd done all week. The beam cut a shaky circle across the room. He checked the breaker box mounted by the pantry. The porch light switch had been flipped clean off, not tripped, not blown. Flipped, like a hand had reached in and done it deliberately. But the walker was still outside. It hadn't come in. It couldn't come in. Not unless he let it. The knocking started again, softer now, almost gentle. 3 light taps followed by a pause, like patience itself. "Ethan," the voice said, his own voice again, the mimicry sliding back into his register with unsettling ease. "You know this house better than you think. Ask Harris what happened to the last renter. Ask him what he isn't telling you." "I don't need to ask you anything," Ethan said, though his voice betrayed how badly he wanted to. "You already know part of it. Saw it on the tree, didn't you? They don't all leave. You want to know why?" He didn't answer. He backed toward the stairs instead, flashlight sweeping the windows, checking each latch though he already knew they were locked. Something moved past the kitchen window. Not a shape exactly, more an absence, a smear of deeper dark against the already dark glass, there and gone. "Because some of them figure it out too late," the voice continued, drifting now, circling the cabin the way the gouges in the dirt had circled it. "Figure out that the rules only work as long as somebody's willing to enforce them. Harris's brother built this cabin on old ground that already had something living underneath it, long before any log was cut. He didn't drive it off, he just learned how to live next to it. Learned the rules, taught them to every fool that rented this place after. But rules only hold if the person following them believes they matter more than what they want." "What do you want?" Ethan called out, hating how much his voice shook. "Same thing every year. A voice, a face, a way in. You've got both, and you're standing right there, Ethan, all alone. Nobody left to call. Nobody left to open a door for you if you screamed. That's why we chose you. Broken things let go easier." The words landed exactly where they were meant to. In the raw place Laura's absence had carved out, in the space where his job used to be, in every quiet hour of the last 6 weeks. For one dangerous heartbeat, Ethan actually felt the pull of it. The temptation not toward the voice outside, but toward the idea that maybe it was right. Maybe none of this mattered enough to fight for. He caught himself in that thought and hated it immediately. Recognized it as exactly the kind of bait the thing outside had been built, or born, or summoned, whatever it was, to offer. "No," he said out loud, mostly to himself. "That's not going to work." He climbed the stairs to the loft, flashlight beam jumping, and pulled his phone from the nightstand. 1 bar of signal, flickering. He called Harris. It rang twice before picking up, and Harris's voice came through tight with a fear Ethan hadn't heard in the old man before. "The light's out, isn't it?" Harris said, not a question. "It's outside right now. It knows things. It's using Laura's voice, my ex, and it says something about a last renter, says you're not telling me everything. Listen to me." Harris's voice cracked with urgency. "There's a shed out back of the cabin, east side, half buried under the ivy. Inside there's a lantern, not electric, oil-fed old thing, my brother swore by it. The walker can mess with wires, mess with switches, but it can't touch open flame. Not directly, not without a body to do it with hands. You need to get that lantern lit and get it up on the porch before sunrise. And you need to get through the next few hours without opening that door, no matter what it says, no matter whose voice it borrows." "You're telling me I have to go outside? Past the light?" I know what I'm asking." Harris's voice dropped, guilt heavy. The last renter, name was Daniel, good kid. Third night, it used his mother's voice. She'd passed 2 years before, and he hadn't ever really made peace with that. He opened the door around 3 a.m. I found the cabin empty the next afternoon. No sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle, door standing wide open, and that was it. I should have told you straight out instead of just handing you a list of rules like it was nothing but a formality. I'm sorry, son, I truly am. But you can fix this if you're fast and you don't lose your nerve. The line crackled and died before Ethan could ask anything more. He sat there a moment in the dark loft, phone glowing uselessly in his hand, listening to the voice still murmuring down below, patient, endless, wearing Laura's grief like a favorite coat. Then he made himself move. He grabbed the poker again, tucked the flashlight into his jacket pocket, and went to the back window, the one facing away from the front porch, away from the voice, and eased it open as quietly as he could. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet leaves and, underneath it, something faintly sour, like meat left too long. He climbed out into the yard, dropped low, and moved fast along the back wall of the cabin toward the east side, where a tangle of ivy nearly swallowed a small leaning shed. Behind him, from the front porch, the voice noticed almost immediately. Ethan. Confused first, then sharper, angrier, losing the softness of Laura's tone entirely. Where are you going? Come back to the door. Come back and talk to me. He didn't answer. He reached the shed, hauled the swollen wooden door open with a shriek of old hinges, and swept the flashlight across a cramped space full of rusted tools, coiled rope, and there, on a shelf at the back, an old brass lantern, glass intact, a can of lamp oil beside it, gone tacky with age but still liquid inside. His hands shook so badly it took him 3 tries to get the wick primed and the oil poured. He struck a match from a box he found tucked beside the lantern, and on the second try, flame caught and steadied, throwing warm orange light across the inside of the shed. Something screamed. The pitch of it seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the tree line, and Ethan felt it more in his chest than his ears, a pressure that made him drop to one knee. Through the shed's open door he saw it, finally, for the first time. Not clearly, never clearly, just an impression at the edge of the trees where the lantern light failed to reach. Something too tall, too thin, limbs bent at angles that didn't belong to anything that walked upright, its face a smear of shifting darkness that seemed to be trying, and failing, to hold a shape. Ethan didn't wait to see more. He grabbed the lantern and ran, flame guttering wildly with each stride, back around the side of the cabin toward the front porch. The thing kept pace with him through the trees, always at the edge of the light's reach, never quite entering it, that same low, wordless keening trailing behind it like smoke. He hit the porch steps and jammed the lantern into the empty bracket where the electric bulb used to hang, hands burning slightly from the hot brass. And the moment the flame steadied there, casting its full warm circle across the porch and the first few yards of the yard, the screaming cut off entirely. The tall shape at the tree line simply wasn't there anymore. No retreat, no sound, just absence, as complete as if it had never existed. Ethan sank down onto the porch boards, back against the door, chest heaving, and stayed there until the sky over the ridge began to pale toward gray. He did not sleep. He did not try the door. He simply watched the lantern burn, feeding it oil twice more from a spare can he found by the woodpile, until true dawn broke gold over the tree line and the ordinary sounds of the forest. Birds, wind, the creak of branches, came back all at once, as if a held breath had finally been released. Harris arrived a little after 8, driving too fast up the gravel road, and found Ethan sitting on the porch steps beside a lantern burned down to its last inch of oil, staring out at the yard like a man who had aged 5 years in one night. "You're alive," Harris said, and the relief in his voice was almost as unsettling as anything from the night before. "Barely," Ethan said. It used Laura's voice, told me about Daniel. Harris's jaw tightened, but he nodded and didn't try to walk it back. "I'll tell you everything now, all of it. Every rule, and why it's a rule, and what happens if you break each one. Not the short version, the whole thing. You've earned that much." He sat down heavily on the step beside Ethan, looking out at the quiet tree line the way a man looks at an old familiar wound. "But I'll tell you this for free, right now. The lantern only buys you one night's peace. It'll be back. It's always been back. Question is whether you're staying, now that you know what's really out there." Ethan looked out at the trees, at the ordinary October morning light falling gold and harmless across ground that, 12 hours ago, had held something with no right to exist. He thought about Laura's voice sobbing through the door, about the tally marks on the oak, about how close he'd come to turning that deadbolt out of nothing but grief and loneliness. "I need to understand what this thing actually is," he said finally. "Not folklore, not a story to scare renters. What it is, and how you stop it for good. Not just for one night." Harris was quiet for a long moment, watching the lantern's last flame gutter and die in the growing daylight. "Then you'd best come inside," he said. "That's a longer conversation than we've got time for out here in the open." Ethan followed Harris inside. But before Harris could say another word, the landline rang. Once, twice, Harris froze. Then Ethan's own voice came from the receiver. "Ask Harris what happened to the 36th renter." Harris slowly looked at Ethan. His face had gone pale. Who was the 36th renter, and why did Harris already know? To be continued.